Email is at the core of most modern web applications, be that from email you received when you register an account, when you reset your password, when you set up two-factor authentication. Perhaps it's a one-time login, or perhaps it's a marketing email or one of those transactional emails after you make a purchase. Email is at the core of our applications. And that poses the question, or poses the problem I should say, to QA and testing teams. How do we test all these emails, especially when the emails can be sent around all different parts of our applications? So how are people tackling this problem? One way we see people tackling this problem is to use no tool at all. They use their personal and their work email addresses as part of their test flows. However, that can result in messy inboxes. You've now got your test emails mixing with your work emails or your personal emails. We have to manage those accounts. People have spreadsheets with email addresses and passwords in there which get shared around with the team. Not very secure. They don't have any automated tests because they can't use any tools to automate some of these workflows. Sometimes providers realize what you're doing with an account and may block that email address. And the biggest one of all, it just doesn't scale. You're limited by how you share those accounts. And then there's also data concerns. What are you sending in those emails? Are you working on features that people shouldn't know about yet? And can these emails be seen by the wrong people? This is where Mailinator comes in. Mailinator is a purposely designed tool purely for the testing of email receipt and workflows. Think of it as your private email system with instant access to trillions, and I do mean trillions of inboxes with no setup required. So how does Mailinator solve this problem? With Mailinator, you have unlimited, instantly available inboxes. You don't have to set up an inbox, you just pick the address and it will work instantly. Private domains, you can use your own domains or you can get a private Mailinator domain just for you and your team. Messages arrive near instantly thanks to the dedicated infrastructure that the Mailinator team have built. There is an API first design which allows you to use the API maybe as part of your automated tests or maybe as part of your exploratory testing. But also people can use the UI to see and retrieve these emails. And then there's also automations allowing you to be notified when certain emails have arrived, perhaps if you have a long running scenario. And there's also lots of nifty features within the UI and the API to help you extract the data that you're looking for in these all important emails. Mailinator is that essential tool that you need if you're regularly doing email testing and email workflow. With Mailinator, we gain speed. As soon as an email arrives in Mailinator's infrastructure, it's instantly available in the UI or via the API. Scale, trillions of inboxes for all your testing scenarios. Secure, Mailinator adheres to security standards, but by utilizing Mailinator, your emails are only accessible by you and your team members. Simplicity, whether you want to use the UI or the API, people can get access to the emails to help them test the scenarios they're testing. Mailinator really does become part of your testing infrastructure. That layer where you have to deal with emails, you can hand it all over to Mailinator and improve the efficiency of your email testing. There are two ways to get started with Mailinator. Number one is to use the publicly available instant inboxes. There's no sign up required, simply choose the name of the inbox and you can use that as part of your testing. However, if someone happens to choose the same name as you, they can also access that same inbox. Inboxes are publicly available to anyone who enters the same name. There is no API access for the public inboxes, and also there's no automations. The second option is to use a verified or a paid for account. When you sign up for a verified account, you can then create your own private inbox that is only visible to you. If you signed up for a team account, that inbox will be visible to you and your team members. This means your inboxes are isolated and secure. No one else can read them but you and your team. You'll also get access to the API, allowing you to retrieve emails programmatically, grab links from them, grab things such as codes, and check the content, subjects, and the arrival of that email. You will also get to take advantage of the automations, allowing you to subscribe to webhooks, as well as set up rules to automatically detect the contents of an email. So let's get started with Mailinator. First, we're going to create a free public inbox. So at the homepage of Mailinator, I'm just going to choose my free inbox name. I'm going to do Richard Testing and click Go. There we go. Now I have Richard Testing at mailinator.com, which I can use in my application. But let's send the practice email just so we can see how it works. So in my email here, I'm just going to send an email to richardtesting at mailinator.com. I've put, hello Richard, how is the video going? Thanks. And I put some bold and italics in there as well. So we'll just click back over to Mailinator and we'll wait for the email to appear in our inbox. So there we have it. The email has now arrived in our inbox, lightning quick, and let's open it. So we can see here, we have, hello Richard, how is the video going? And we can see the text that arrived. So that was no setup at all, just put in the email, choose a public inbox name, and you can start using that address. But as I mentioned, that email is now visible to everybody. So if I go back to the home page and I do Richard Testing again and click Go, my email is still there. So as mentioned, these emails are public. These public inboxes are available to anyone who may happen to choose the same domain as you. The second way to get started with Mailinator is by using a verified account or a team or business account. To get started with a verified account, you can just click Get Verified, fill in the details, and you can get yourself a verified account. But in true testing style, here is one I made earlier. So on this account, I have a private domain, bradshaw.testinator.com. So let's send an email to that. Okay, so I've drafted an email to send to our team inbox or our verified inbox. And as you can see, I'm sending it to testing@bradshaw.testinator.com because that's my private inbox domain. But I could put anything in front of that. Testing 123, ABC 123, anything is allowed. You don't have to create that inbox separately. It's wildcarded. Anything you enter here will appear in the same team inbox. And I've put team email with attachments. Hello Richard, here is the logo from Mailinator taken from the mailinator.com domain, and I've added the email as an attachment. So let's send that into our team inbox. I go back to Mailinator, and again we can see a repeat here of the fact I can send anything to @bradshaw.testinator.com. So let's just wait for our email to arrive. So as we can see, our email has arrived. So let's open it. So we can see the text that we put in our email. We can see HTML if there was any HTML. We could see the JSON if we wanted to see what it would look like via the API. And we can also see the links that we added in our email. In this example, it was mailinator.com. That could be incredibly useful if you wanted to check that your email contained the right links. And via here, we can just see the links only. And via the API, we can also use the same mechanism to get the links directly via the API. And we can also see that there was an attachment added to the email. So within here, we can see all our different emails. And we can see the things in there that matter the most. And if you wanted to, you could forward those emails to perhaps to your work email if you needed to, or any other email address at all. And obviously, we can also delete the emails. When we use a public inbox, those emails get deleted within usually 1 or 2 hours. However, with our private verified inboxes, our emails will stay as long as we have storage. As soon as we reach our maximum storage, older emails will start automatically being deleted. While you can have any inbox name you desire, we found that it's better to follow some of these good practices. I personally like to use my environment and then the name of the product, and then I choose my private domain to be the company.testinator.com. That gives me flexibility and I can find my emails based on other information such as the title. Sometimes though, I might use feature and the test ID. If I'm in a domain where I have test IDs, I can tie them up to the feature, potentially even put a timestamp on there to tie it to one specific execution. I also may want to tie it to a scenario, QA.signup, QE.signup, test.forgot password, to again put some contextual information into the email. Or I might also choose to use environment and then take a piece of the test data. Let's say I've signed up with Richard123, I could do test.richard123 at company.testinator.com, and then I know that that's signed up to that's related to the account that I signed up as. So it's really completely up to you, but following this pattern will keep your inboxes clean, speed up email retrieval, and allow future debugging. Many modern web applications rely on one-time passwords or two-factor authentication being sent via email, and this poses a challenge for testing it. You have two options really. One is you alter the application under test to give us access to that code, which we can then use to verify the code. However, that means we're altering the application and isn't actually the true end-to-end flow, which in production would be that we generate the code, put it in an email, send the email via whatever provider the application uses, and the user at the end receives that email. So in order to really test this programmatically, we need to take advantage of Mailinator. Let's have a look how to do it. So here I've built myself a basic application. It mimics one-time passwords, sends them via an email provider, and allows us to verify the code afterwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Mailinator to do this. So I already have a private domain on Mailinator, so I'm just going to say testing at bradshaw.testinator.com. And if I click send verification code, my application now is going to send a two-factor authentication code to that email. So if I pop over to Mailinator, you can see the email is already there. Mailinator is super fast. And we can see that the code is 463351. So if I go back to my test app, 463351, and click verify, we can see that we have successfully verified our account, which is fantastic. Now, if this was an application like the ones you're all using, that email address will now be gone, right? That account's created, no one can sign up for that again. So let's say you wanted to test another account. If you weren't using something like Mailinator, you would have to go and create another email address. However, thanks to Mailinator's wildcard functionality, what we can do is we can just do testing1 at bradshaw.testinator.com, and I'll send the code to that email address. And because that's my domain on Mailinator, my verified domain, if I go back into here, there it is, testing1, do not reply. So the code is 120982. So I can go in here and do 120982. Email successfully verified. So what that shows us is with the wildcard functionality, we have unlimited inboxes at our disposal. So we don't have to worry about generating loads and loads of email accounts because Mailinator will just take care of it for us. This allows us to test as many permutations as you want, be flexible with your data, and keep testing all those critical paths. So this works for doing it as a human from an exploratory point of view. But what about an API? And this time we're going to do testing again at bradshaw.testinator.com. I'm going to send that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and check the actual inbox first, just in the UI, so you can see that there's no tricks. So there's the email come in, 505895. And what I've created here is myself a little script. So we'll just run the script. And there we go, 505895. And what this has done, as it's used Mailinator's API and my private API key, because I've got a verified or planned business account, and I've called my inboxes and said, go and get me the inbox testing at bradshaw.testinator.com, because that was the inbox name that I gave. And as we saw in my inbox, there's two accounts. I got it to get the last email, and then I said, I want you to see if you can find a 6-digit code. Just use as a regex in the code itself, and there you go. It has pulled out that code. So if we go back to my website, 505895, just to prove that it works, we have successfully verified it. So this shows us the power of utilizing Mailinator. We have those unlimited inboxes, rapid retrieval of those codes. We're not going to get any timeouts when it comes to trying to test these applications. We're not running around trying to find passwords for different inboxes. We're not losing time creating a load of email addresses. We can take advantage of the wildcard and we can test as many permutations as we would ever need. So there you have it. That's the power of the inboxes and how you can use the API to test two-factor authentication. So what does email receipt testing mean? Emails are made up of many different parts and they all do various different jobs. However, when it's about receiving the email, there's a few things that we care about more than others. For example, the timestamps. If you're testing that your email has arrived with the user using Mailinator, you want to make sure that email has arrived in a timely manner. Customers shouldn't be waiting several minutes to receive their emails. So we can use the timestamps that from the mail server when it was sent versus when it arrived. We can also look at some of the headers. Sometimes there's tracking stuff in headers, sometimes there's different metadata. We want to test all that, and that can have various impacts on things like spam detection. We want to make sure the subject is correct, right? Sometimes this is all the user sees, or even nowadays people are using AI to summarize their emails. So we need to make sure the subject is correct, has no typos in it, and is what we were setting in the application. Then we have the HTML. Emails can be in HTML or they can be in plain text. So it's important that we make sure that our emails are looking correct when they have that and making sure they have the right tags. Then there's things like links. Emails can have links. We want to make sure those links are correct. Have we accidentally sent some links that point to test instead of prod? Have we accidentally said here's a link and there actually isn't a link? And then also emails can have attachments. And we want to make sure these things are all present and correct when sending emails. And we can do that using Mailinator, be it exploratory testing related or automation. Let's take a look. So in Mailinator, we can see a lot of this useful information. For example, who was the email sent to? We obviously would expect that to be our email address, but who did the email come from? So here you can see that this is my test application, but it's from a do not reply. Is that what we want it to be, or should it have been something more accurate? We could test that here, and we can see when the email was received. Then if we look at the contents of the email, we can see the actual HTML and how that looks. So we could make sure we had the right headers, perhaps make sure there's only one header. Think of all the permutations you would want to do and all the assertions you would want to do. And we can do that now in the UI, or we could do that via the API. So we can see that code there. And then if we have a look at the text, we can just see the text. If we have a look at the JSON here, we can see all the headers. And these headers in a lot of applications have importance. So here we could get all the headers and we could pull them out one by one and make sure they are exactly what we want them to be. We can also see the different parts of the email where we have the text that came through, your verification code, as well as some of the more useful information. And we can also see the HTML version. Then we can see links. Again, we mentioned Mailinator can pull out links for us, so we can see those links in there as well. And we can also see this information via the API. So here's just an API call I did to get a message, and you can see that we get sent the plain text, we get sent the HTML version, and we also get sent all the headers. So we can also do all these assertions programmatically in code just by doing an API test. Even though it's not an API test, it's an email test, but because of Mailinator, we can take advantage of API testing tools, such as the ones that come in Playwright or Cypress, or things like extensions like Postman or Rest Assured. We can make those calls and get those emails in JSON and then run assertions on them to make sure that our emails are looking as good as they can and ensuring that that means they're going to be received by our customers. One of the advantages of using Mailinator is that we can now automate some of our email testing scenarios. This is thanks to Mailinator's API-first approach, means that there's API access to all of the inboxes that we create, meaning that we can pull down codes during our UI automated tests, as well as do some testing of our emails itself, because we can get at it programmatically via an API. So let's have a look at some tests in action. So before we take a look at the code, let's see the tests actually running. So the first test is open, and it's basically going to do some test email content. It's going to have a look at the contents of the email and run some tests. The second one is going to verify the two-factor authentication code from end to end. And the second one is going to try doing invalid code. Fantastic, so all those 3 tests pass, but let's have a look at what they actually did. So if we take a look at the first one, which is the email verification flow, we're able to use a hybrid approach, using Playwright to drive the UI, but then using Mailinator to get access to the email via the API. So this is just standard Playwright, and we are filling in the home page, filling in the form, causing it to send an email. We then wait for that email to arrive and we pull out the code using the API. So let's have a look at us pulling out the code. So in order to pull out the code, we have to take advantage of Mailinator's API. The first thing we have to do is get our inbox. Now our inbox is the unique name that we can use every time, or it could be the same name over and over again. But in our instance, we decided to take advantage of some good practices when it comes to naming, and we called it test valid and then a timestamp of today, giving us a unique inbox. And as we've mentioned already so many times, there's trillions of inbox, it's unlimited what you can do. So this just keeps our test nice and clean, and it's easier to debug and find different results in the future. So we go and get our inbox. Once we've got our inbox, we then use the get message API, so we can get that very specific message. And then once we've got that message, we can utilize the API to pull stuff out. For example here, terrible looking regex, but just tries to pull out the 6-digit code. So if we go back to the first test we saw, which was the email content, you can see again, I've just duplicated this in Playwright, but we can see down here that we can now pull some things out, therefore the subject. So subject is an important part of an email. We want to make sure it's correct. So therefore we can see that we can do an assertion now, because we're able to call it via API and assert that the subject is your verification code. We can also see the sender's address. Often companies want emails to come from the same correct person, such as support or help, or even their name. In my test app, it's do not reply, but we can check that that is correct. We can also check that there's a HTML part of the email, and we can make sure that exists. We can try and make sure there's a 6-digit code. We added a link in our email for support. Is the link there, and does it actually look like a link? It does. We can see the extracted link. We could do things like look at the style sheet in the email to see if it's matching our branding. And then we can also check the contents of the email to make sure that it has the wording that we're expecting it to have. And there's a whole lot more you could do now that you have you have access to the email in JSON via the API. And then the other scenario that we saw was our email verifications. So we're filling in Playwright, we're getting the code, and we're making sure it's successful. And then the second one, we're triggering the email to be sent, but this time we're ignoring the code that we get back and just setting it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and making sure that it is indeed rejected. So that's how you can take advantage of the Mailinator API by blending it with your UI tool of choice to automate some of those permutations that you couldn't do before. This allows you now to put those very crucial email flow tests into your pipeline and run them repeatedly without worrying about what email address you're using, filling up inboxes. With Mailinator, that isn't a problem. You use the wildcard functionality, have as infinite inboxes, and you can do that by taking a good practice approach to the naming of your inboxes. Because they're unlimited, be specific, make them unique, and you'll never run out of email addresses again, and you can automate to your heart's content.